Hello and welcome to the Meditation Conversation, the podcast to support your spiritual revolution. I'm your host, Kara Goodwin, and today I'm joined by Michael Harris. Michael is the best-selling author of Falling Down, Getting Up, and his mission is to help motivated yogis, healers, and entrepreneurs get their personal voice, message, and stories out to the world. So I'm so happy to meet you, Michael. Thanks for being here today.
It's great to be here, Kara, and thank you for having me on your show.
My pleasure. So I wanted to start with how vascular disease led you to yoga. Can you
Oh,
share a
great
little about
question.
that?
Yeah. Let me go back a little bit further than that. When I was 12 years old, I had a water skiing accident. And as a result of the accident, I ended up having 60% of my liver removed, gallbladder, broken ribs, collapsed lung, and I slid into a coma for about 10 days and I had a near death experience. And in the near death experience, I had left my body, and it's the best that I can experience it, or always my recollection was it was at the end of my coma that I had. And I found myself within a gathering of spirit, as I call it. And it was like just the most incredible, loving experience that I had ever felt in my life. And then I felt myself coming back to my body. And I didn't want to go back. I didn't want to come back. And I was reaching out, and they said that I wasn't through yet. And they said, "You're not through yet. Everything will be okay." Well, I was reaching out with an arm, because I wanted to stay. But I came back, and that's when I woke up. I previous to that, while I was in my coma, a nurse, a doctor, my mom, my dad, they would, put my hand in their hand and say, like, squeeze, and I couldn't move it. And so I was aware I had some consciousness, but I wasn't able to communicate or do anything. So as I came back to my body, I woke up, and then I actually healed fairly quickly within about a year. I mean, I had a tube in the side for about 6 months, but I was a 12-year-old kid. And my self-esteem had just totally plummeted. I'd gone from this very active kid to not being able to do much. And I didn't feel very worthy. I ended up starting to drink in high school and such. And that gave me a new power, or so I thought, the drinking and the drugs and everything else. And I did that up till about 27 years old. And I had struggled with it in my early 20s, trying to get sober and let it go. And it never really stuck. And so here I am, 27 years old. I start walking on a cane, thinking that I have some nerve damage in my legs, and kind of ignoring it for a while, just kind of like, oh, this is going on, what is this, but kind of ignoring it. I end up going to a chiropractor, and she actually came from a long family history. She was Mayan healers, right?
Mm.
And she said, this isn't something that I can do. She says, you need to see a vascular specialist. Well, I'm a 27-year-old man, and I'd never really heard of a vascular specialist. What is that?
Mm.
And I ended up at OHSU, which is Oregon Health Sciences University in Portland, in the vascular department. And as I'm lying there having my initial examination by the nurse, she's doing the Doppler examination and taking a look at my legs. And she calls in one of the vascular professors pretty quickly. And he comes in and he looks at my right leg and my left leg, and my right foot is all kind of purple, red, blue, just discolored. And it turns out my right leg was 100% blocked and my left leg was 65% blocked. I didn't know that I had any issue in my left leg because my right leg was more dominant, so to speak. And they said, we might have to take your foot. They were referring to my right leg. And I said in no uncertain terms, using a word starting with F, the
Fire truck?
yeah, fire truck. Yeah. Yeah. No fire truck way are you going to do
Yeah.
that. And I ended up having what's called a fempop, which is essentially bypass surgery. And I had it on both legs. And it definitely restored my blood flow. And then about a month later, I was back in the hospital with blood clots for about a week until that diminished. And then a few months later, they wanted to do it again because my legs had already reblocked.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
Now, going back a little bit, my blood panels were all normal. My cholesterol was normal. It was like 142 at the time of the initial surgery. Yet I was still presenting with atherized plaque within my arteries or within my popliteal arteries in my legs. I wasn't having any cardiovascular issues, although my dad had died about a year earlier of a heart attack. It wasn't his first one, the widowmaker, as they call it. And so he had passed away, and we do have heart disease in my family. But the second time when they wanted to do surgery again, as I'm laying there in the bed and the surgeons are all around my bed, there's half a dozen of them from OHSU saying, if you don't have this additional surgery, first we're going to have to end up amputating your legs, and then you'll likely die probably within about 6 months because this is, happening so quickly again. It shouldn't happen this quickly, but
Oh
we
my,
don't know why it's happening. And this is, Kara, this is where I made a decision, and I can't tell you why I made that decision, but my decision was no way. I'm not going to keep having surgery, every few months. It's just, that's not going to be my life. And at that point, I didn't know really much of anything about the spiritual realm, so to speak. But I ended up signing out AMA against medical advice, leaving the hospital. They wheeled me to the front door. I had my cane, and I didn't know what I was going to do, where I was going to go. But basically, I mean, they gave me pretty dire predictions. And, I'm a little, you know, doctors, for various reasons, I think sometimes do that. I think they want to scare their patients sometimes to get them to act. But I've also heard, I have friends now that are doctors. I don't go to doctors very often, but they come to me more now than I go to them. But, you know, they will say that the ornery patients, so to speak, sometimes do better than the compliant patients. They're finding their own path. And that's what I did. I found my own path. So, to make a long story short, I ended up in a rehabilitation center. It was called Pritikin Longevity Center. And it was in Santa Monica. It was at the end of Pico and Ocean, right on the Santa Monica boardwalk. And as I got there, again, I was on a cane with one hand and using my other hand to walk along the wall. And even with that, I was walking maybe 10 feet, 20 feet before I was just worn out. And for those that aren't familiar with the Pritikin Center, there was a guy named Nathan Pritikin a very long time ago that started it. And it was primarily a plant-based diet that he offered and really moving the body. So when I got there, as the doctor there, as I was talking to him, he said, I want you to really do two things. He says, eat as much as you want. He says, because you don't have a problem. Because my weight was, I was about 30 pounds underweight. And he said, you can eat as much plant-based food as you want without even considering it. He says, but the other thing I want you to do is to get up and start walking. He says, just get up and walk. go out on the boardwalk, walk 10 feet, walk 12 feet, walk 14 feet. He says, as you do that, your body, your legs will build new blood vessels, new collateral blood vessels. Well, the professors at OHSU had said, when it hurts and you're walking, you better get in here to have more surgery. The doctor down there said, no more surgery, just get up and walk. Don't worry about it. And so within about 2 weeks, I was walking 2 miles, unassisted,
Wow.
totally changed. My mind changed. My self-esteem started getting better. I started feeling more comfortable with myself. I had committed to my sobriety at that point as well. So I was starting to get sober. I ended up drinking one more time. I'm 64 now, but so I've been sober also since I was 30. So
Wow.
for quite a while.
Yeah. Yeah. That's fantastic. So how did the NDE shape things? Because you mentioned that when you were going through that hard time at age, I think 27, um, you said like you didn't have a lot of experience with the spiritual realm, or that wasn't really a big part of your life. You had at age 12 that NDE where you felt that, or that you had been with those, I can't remember how you said it, but kind of like with guides or a council or
Right.
otherworldly beings. Um, so how did those things go together? Was it kind of an experience that didn't necessarily stick with you for that period of time, or yeah.
Well, one of the things that happened that I realized didn't really realize it when I was a kid, when I was 12, 13, 14, other than feeling like I was angry at God. You'll take somebody like Anita Morjani, where she had a near death experience and she came back and her body healed really quickly from her cancer. And she was just like talking about spirit and happy and all this. My experience when I came back is I was angry. I was resentful towards God for many, many years. And so I held on to that. And I think that contributed to my alcohol and drug use as well, because I was trying
Mm.
to find something to give me peace. Well, you know, going up to, 27 years old, having my surgery, and then the last time that I drank when I was 30, I had been sober for 23 months and then drank. And I ended up back in the hospital from the drinking. And a friend came to me and he said, "Are you ready?" And I knew exactly what he meant, and I knew that this God that I had been so angry at, so upset with, so resentful for, was really the only place left to turn. That
Mm.
because I couldn't do it on my own. And so I literally had a swooshing feeling. I mean, I still feel the swooshing feeling that came through my body when I said, "I'm ready." And as soon as that happened, everything was removed. The desire to drink, I was smoking cigarettes, the desire to smoke. I hadn't used any drugs for a while, but everything was removed. I didn't know what was going to happen, but I knew things were going to be different. So that was really my first real acceptance in the world of God. However, in the mid 80s, I had also spent a couple of years with a program called The Search for God. There was a Edgar Cayce program,
Mm.
for those that are familiar with Edgar Cayce,
Mhm.
that we did do some meditation and we tapped into our intuition. But I would say I was probably there 80% of the time, consciously there. I don't mean
Mhm.
physically, I mean consciously. So, I mean, I had had some experience, but it never really got me, so to speak, or I never really got it.
So tell me what you mean when you say you were probably 80% there consciously.
I still had a lot of doubts.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay.
Yeah.
So you
Yeah.
were you were in this program and you were kind of like quote unquote buying 80% of it maybe?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Kind of still a little doubts, resistance. Well, is this really true? I
Mhm.
don't know.
Okay. I
That
got.
kind of thing.
So how did all of this then lead to yoga? Because now you have like 3 teaching certifications and you work with lots of yogis and healers and so forth. So how did all of that dovetail into the yoga world?
Yeah. One of the things that happened in the Pritikin Center, they called it a yoga class. It was really more of a very gentle stretching class. But I did that while I was there. I actually had 2 visits. I spent 2 different times there for 2 weeks. But when I first started doing it, and I'd never thought of myself as doing yoga, and yoga wasn't that big yet in the 80s. There were some people doing it. My mom would do it occasionally. Um, but I really kind of liked it. And so when I went back to Portland, because I was living in Portland, I was going to the gym. I was walking a lot. I was going to the gym and working out and started to do this yoga class. I would see these people doing yoga in the other room, and I thought, well, I want to go do that. So as soon as I did that, and it was a remarkable teacher um, for um, for a gym, I'll say, because sometimes gym yoga is a little bit different, right? But and we would do candle gazing, and she was just really remarkable, and she really helped open up the door. And so I started going to another studio and started diving more into yoga, more into meditation, more into stillness and calmness, and learning to still the fluctuations of the mind. And that was one of the things that yoga was helping me recognize and reveal to me is I can find natural ways to still my mind. I didn't need substances or alcohol or anything else to try to do it, and it doesn't work that well anyway. It just makes you pass out, you know. So as I did that, and then I started getting into Ashtanga yoga, which I really liked in the early 90s, and did some work with David Swenson and Nancy Gilgoff and some of the Ashtanga teachers that have been around for a long time, and really liked it. I ended up, though, in 1993, a Bikram studio opened in Portland. And it's the hot, it's 105 degrees and you sweat. And I went to this class and I hated it. It was hot, it was sweaty. I thought it was stupid. I said, people don't do yoga like this. This isn't real yoga. And so I was kind of going back and forth a little bit, though, from Ashtanga to Bikram. And then I had a shoulder injury, and the doctors wanted to do surgery on my shoulder. And now this is 97. And I went back to Bikram, and within a month, my shoulder injury was gone. And I attribute some of the shoulder injury to pretty aggressive downward dog. And in Ashtanga, you're jumping through the legs a lot, jump throughs, and doing some different things. Whether or not that is true or not, I don't know. That's what I attributed it to at the time. But my shoulder injury went away, and I still had probably anywhere from a level 1 to level 3 pain in my legs, out of a scale of 10. And I thought, you know, I want to find a way to get rid of all the pain in my body. I'd made a bunch of money doing option trading. I'd work a couple hours a day doing that. And so I had the ability to take a couple of years off. So I checked around. I wanted to learn from a bona fide yoga master, right? And I found myself writing a check and going to the Bikram training in 1998, not to become a teacher, but to heal. Because I thought this Bikram guy would just like magically heal me, right? And he'd have none of it, right? So I went to him, and there's a posture called standing head to knee in the Bikram series. And that posture hurt me the most when I was balancing on my left leg. And I asked him how to modify. He said, Michael, no modification. Just do what you can. I said, but Bikram, there's got to be a modification. And he said, don't worry about it. Forget about it. Just do the yoga. Well, I wanted to worry about it. I didn't want to forget about it. And I didn't want to do the yoga the way that he wanted me to. And at first I wanted my money back. He said, Michael, no money back. He says, just do the yoga. Well, about 10 days later, I'm in class. I'm standing on my left leg and I'm kicking my right leg out. And, ultimately you bring your elbows down and you bring your forehead to your knee as the final expression of the posture. And as I did that, I noticed that there was no more pain in my left leg. It was gone. And I had tears just flowing out of my face out of joy, as this happened. And I began to understand what he said. Don't worry about it. Forget about it. Just do the yoga.
Wow. Well, that's wonderful. I feel that, I don't hear a lot of good stories about Bikram. So um, I feel that I do owe it to people if you're listening and you're moved by that. It's a wonderful story, and be very careful with with him as a person, Bikram. It sounds like you had a great experience, but again, he is a troubled person, and people do need to be very careful with him.
Well, yeah, and I would add something to that too. Much of his difficulties, his personal that he struggles with, I saw very little of it, and I was around a lot.
Hmm.
And I think about what Neil Donald Walsh reminded us about, and I'd heard this story before. And for the listeners, I invite anybody, if you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to the episode. But he talks about the situation with the Pope and the person that shot him,
Hmm.
and this idea of developing understanding versus forgiveness. And I
Yeah.
think that applies in so many different ways. And, um, I think it applies here as well, too, is how do we have an understanding without being fearful?
Right. And I think his time has passed.
Yeah.
I would not encourage anybody to go and seek out Bikram. It's been, it's really easy to find information about the abuse of power that's happened there. I'm thrilled that your experience wasn't like that. Um, but it's very clear, I think, with, the power, the money, the sexual abuse and so forth, that I want to be responsible in making sure that it's a well-rounded picture of what somebody may get themselves into. Because unfortunately, he's still around. He was not. He fled the country, right? So
Well,
I don't think
he's
he's being
living outside
justice.
of the country. I haven't talked to him for some time. Um, the He's not charged with anything. He's not convicted of anything. They didn't find anything to charge him with on a criminal side at all. He had some civil liabilities that he had to deal with, but on the criminal side, there was no criminal actions that they felt were um, met the threshold.
Mm. Well, it's a fascinating study in
But that's a whole nother
it's a
story
whole other
without having
story,
to.
and you have a beautiful journey to focus on. Um, so you had that healing through the work that you were doing with yoga, and you've been sober for it sounds like 34 years. My notes say 33 years, but now it's you've 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 had another year. So that's wonderful. What do you attribute to being able to make that change for good to sobriety? Was it that, I mean, you talk about that sloshing feeling that you felt come through. Um, did you kind of feel like there was an infusion? within you energetically, spiritually, that helped that to stick? Because that's a beautiful accomplishment, or a beautiful, looking back and being like, wow, 33, 34 years already.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I mean, that swooshing feeling that I had, I mean, it was like, and I've had different experiences like that over the years. And I mean, I could feel it and I knew it was different. And it was like this energy coming through me, this spiritual energy, this God energy, this universal energy, however, it can be described. It just like it was a vibration within my body.
mm,
And it was like I was going from, like on the radio, like from the static between the stations to getting tuned to the station. So
yeah,
like
I
I had
love
been
that
living in
analogy.
that static, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
And so that has, and you mentioned that you still feel that. You can still feel it when you tune into it, so that it's something that has stayed with you, because that can be, um we can have flashes of things like that, or experiences of things like that. I mean, similar to your near death experience, you had an amazing experience, you have memories of where you were when toward the end of your time in the coma, and it wasn't necessarily something that you were carrying consciously all the time through your challenges and difficulties, but it sounds like that is something that you're able to access over
Well,
time.
it's there all the time.
Mhm.
I don't know if I would call it able to access, but knowing that it's always present. So
Mm,
it's like I don't feel today like I'm coming in and out of it. I feel
mhm,
like I'm in it, if that
mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
that's beautiful. Well, thank you so much for sharing everything. Tell us how people can find out more about you and connect with you.
Well, the easiest way is just go to my website, michaelbharris.com. B is in book, so michaelbharris.com. And any social media links and all that are there. The other thing that I'd like to offer is my book, Falling Down, Getting Up, which is really the first part of the book is more in depth of what happened and my struggles and everything. And the last half of the book is about getting up and what happened and how I healed and some ideas that other people might use as well. So I have a backlink to the book. It's michaelbharris.com/book, BOOK. And it's a free copy of the book that anybody can download. I don't offer it on every podcast that I'm on, but if there's somebody here that feels drawn to it, I invite you to go to that link and download a copy of the book.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, thank you. I'll put that in the show notes. Great. Well, I thank you again. I've really appreciated learning about your journey, and it's definitely a hero's journey. It's very inspiring, and I appreciate you sharing and all the work that you're doing to help to lift others up.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank
Kara.
you.